During my son's funeral, my daughter-in-law threw me out of the place she called her home. My name is Thomas Mitchell, and what happened afterwards changed everything. Picture this with me. Your only child has just died in a car accident. You are wearing a black suit that does not fit as well as before. You're standing by the coffin you paid for, in the house you built with your own hands in 1987. And your daughter-in-law looks you in the eye and says, in front of everyone, "Don't cry anymore. Pack your bags and get out of my house. Now." Then, for good measure, she adds, "I'm done carrying you like a worthless burden." Before entering the story, leave a like and register a support channel for yourself. After listening to the story, please leave a comment on the story to give suggestions to the development channel. Thank you. Now let's start the story. It was the day my son, David, was buried. It was also the day Victoria decided to officially become the queen of the Mitchell kingdom. What she didn't know was simple. The kingdom she thinks she's inherited? I built it. The house she's kicking me out of? My name is the only one ever on the deed. How much money she thought was hers? About $850,000. It was my family's trust, funded by 40 years of work. For 8 years, she lived off my generosity while telling people that I was living off their generosity. I can scream, I could argue, I can beg. I didn't. I just blow. Because sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes it's the spark of something much bigger. Before I tell you how I went from worthless burden to owner of everything she thought was hers, let me ask you one thing. Where are you listening from? And have you ever been treated as if you're inferior just because you're silent? And if you like stories about people finally standing up against disrespect, stay with me until the end. Because 3 days after she threw me out of her house, Victoria walked into her real estate office thinking she owned my world, and walks out realizing that she owns nothing. Let me go back to where it really began. Not a funeral. Not a fight in the kitchen. Back in 1987, back to an empty lot on Maple Street in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. It was just dirt and possibilities back then. I'm 31 years old, a CPA with more discipline than style. My wife, Margaret, has a folder full of magazine scraps. Her favorite kitchen, her dream porch, the exact white she wants on the decor. We didn't have much, but we had a plan. I remember standing there with a cheap coffee pot in my hand, watching the excavator cut the first piece off the ground and telling her, "This is it. This is where we will raise our children." We didn't know that we would only have one child. David was born in 1988. When he was 10, he knew every creak in that house, every loose floorboard, every hiding place in the basement. We plant that house the way other people grow their gardens. In 1987, we were dealing with frames and drywall. I was there every day after work, checking the measurements. In 1989, I installed hardwood flooring myself, sanding, staining, sealing. It took 3 weekends and a pair of broken knees. In 1995, we added a crown mold in the living room. David held the other end of the plank while I nailed it. He was 12 years old and was already taller than his mother. In 2003, we remodeled the kitchen. Margaret gets her dream cabinets. I pretend to care about color, even though I'm really only interested in plumbing getting done right. By the time 2015 rolled around, that house had seen thousands of family dinners, school projects spread across the dining room, high school prom photos on the porch, and a college acceptance letter unfolded on the kitchen island. That house is more than just a building. That's over 30 years of our lives stacked together. David grew up, went to college, became an engineer. He married Victoria in a big, shiny wedding that Margaret and I helped pay for, quietly, through a family trust I'd been sponsoring since the mid-'80s. Victoria is impression. She's polished in a way that we don't. Designer high heels, perfect nails, real estate licenses before she was 30. She speaks fast, laughs out loud, and takes up space in every room she enters. Let's be honest. The red flags were there from the beginning. When she and David came to dinner, she glanced around our living room as if she was repainting everything. "You know, this place would be worth a lot more if there was an open floor plan," she said, tapping at the walls that have united our family for decades. David just smiled. I just shrugged. Let young people think they've discovered homes. Then, 2 years before the funeral, Margaret died. Cancer is so greedy. It doesn't care if your mortgage is paid off or your plans for your retirement trips. One day, you're arguing about what to watch on TV. Next, you're learning oncology vocabulary. After she left, I stayed in the house. People ask me if I want to downsize, move into an apartment, get closer to the comfort of the elderly, whatever that means. I didn't. I stayed with the rickety staircase, the closet too small, the kitchen that Margaret loved. David began to come more. Bring groceries, fix things that don't really need repair. And somewhere along the way, Victoria seems to have decided that makes me dependent. She saw my old Honda Civic in the driveway, my gray suit at church, my coupon at the grocery store, and she thought, David is supporting his poor old dad. She had never thought of asking about trust balances, about deeds, about 40 years of filing taxes downstairs in carefully labeled folders. People don't question a story that matches what they already believe. The night David died, the phone rang at 11:21 p.m. They say car accidents and drunk driving, and we did everything we could. At some point, I realized my coffee mug had broken on the kitchen floor because I was holding the handle, and the rest of it was shattered. 2 months later, we buried him. Funeral homes smell like lilies and polished furniture. Victoria arrived in a perfectly designed black dress, perfect makeup, boots that were probably more expensive than my entire wardrobe. She took over immediately. "I'll handle everything, Tom. You just, sit." Coffin, flowers, playlists. I suggested a song, an old rock song that David and I used to blow up when we were building the house in '87. Victoria closed the door with a cold and quick smile. "Too depressing," she said. "We need something more uplifting. David wants everyone to celebrate." So we celebrated. Or we pretend. At the front desk, in my house, people moved through the rooms as if they were going through a real estate show. I could hear Victoria from the next room, her voice loud enough to reach my right ear. "It's hard for Tom," she told our neighbor Helen Davis. "David really supports him. My father never understood finances. David took care of everything for him." I watched Helen's eyes glance at me with pity. I did taxes for Helen. I know she knows better. But Victoria's story is clearer, louder, and easier to repeat. People believe in the greatest version of the truth they hear. That night, when the last casserole was received and the last guest had left, Victoria cornered me in front of the door. She holds a brochure in one hand and a glass of wine in the other, like a CEO about to fire an inefficient employee. "Tom, we need to talk about your situation." "My situation." "Now you're financially dependent on us," she said. "David has supported you and he's gone." She shrugged. "I can't carry that burden." "Burden." There are words you feel in your bones. It's one of them. I was more generous than I would have been to let you stay here, she continued. But this house is mine now. Everything is mine. David left it all to me. I remember the hardwood grain under my feet in that moment. I remember thinking that I should be angry. Instead, I feel awake. Victoria took my silence to surrender. She slid a printed paper towards me. A timeline. The day of the funeral. The date of sorting my belongings. A day circled in red. November 15th. Moving deadline. I've looked at some senior communities, she added. Sunset Manor only has $800 a month for a studio. It's perfect for someone in your situation. It's there again. Your situation. I looked at that red circle. I don't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't pull out a single tax return or bank statement. I just said, I understand. Because in that moment I did. Not what she thought I understood. I completely understood another thing. Victoria didn't know whose life she was rearranging. The next morning, I sat at the old kitchen table that Margaret and I had bought at a garage sale in 1986. I poured myself a cheap coffee into a chipped mug and made a list. Not what I was losing, but what Victoria thought she was gaining. House. 2,400 square feet on Maple Street. Value, according to Victoria's own estimates, $420,000. Money. David's life insurance, $150,000. The trust of the family. She doesn't even have a clue about its existence. Things. Margaret's antique porcelain cabinet. David's childhood things. Furniture, equipment, everything she finds outdated. Every part of my life she is negotiable. But the part that bothers me the most isn't any of it. That's how she erased us. Pictures of Margaret quietly disappeared from the cloak. David's crayon drawings disappeared from the refrigerator. My CPA certificate has left the office walls. I'm redecorating, she said when I asked. David always said that this place needs to be updated. Update. Like 40 years, memory is a version of software that you can uninstall. That's when something clicks inside me. This is not about money. This isn't even about the house. It's about someone deciding the worth of another human being based on superficial assumptions, and then acting in doing so allows them to treat them the way they want. She thinks I have no money, no choice, no power, no voice. She thought I was stuck. She didn't know I had spent 40 years making sure I would never be stuck. 2 days later, I went down to the basement. If the upper floor is Victoria's future, then the basement is my past. 4 tall metal filing cabinets are located along the wall. Each drawer is labeled by decade, each folder by category. My wife used to joke, if the apocalypse happens, Tom will be the only one who survives, because he can create the material for everything. I opened the bottom drawer. The 1980s. It's there. Purchase of land, 12th March 1987. Buyer, Thomas Mitchell. Amount, $43,000. Construction contract, 3 April 1987. Client, Thomas Mitchell. $78,000 for a custom colony. Deed, March 15, 1987. Owner, Thomas Mitchell. No collateral, paid in full. There are no co-signers. I've been moving through decades. In the 1990s folder, there are property tax receipts, all of which were paid from my account. In the 2000s, insurance policies were in my name. In the 2010s, utility bills, maintenance bills, all had the same owner. David's name does not appear in any of those places. For Victoria, that house is David's house. For the county, with the banks, with the law, it's just mine. Then I went to the back of the drawer, to a folder labeled Trust Documents, Private. That folder was a bomb she didn't know existed. Inside is the Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust, which was established in 1985. List of assets, investments, savings, and finally, this house. Current balance, $853,412. And in bold, clear language, David Mitchell, the beneficiary only for his entire life. There is no ownership, no control. There is no right to transfer. He lived well because I wanted him to. I helped fund his college, his wedding, his first car, prepaid for the things he wanted, all through that trust. But David never owned the motive behind it. And then there's life insurance. Victoria told anyone who would listen, David left me $150,000. It would have helped, but it barely covered the hole his father had left in finances. The policy in my hands says something else. Beneficiary, Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust. In other words, the money is mine. She spent it in her imagination, maybe even out loud, but on paper, on the only piece of paper that mattered, it had never belonged to her. I closed the folder, and for the first time since the funeral, I smiled. It's not because I want revenge, because I realized one thing. Victoria is not the villain of some tragic epic. She's just a loud person, doesn't ask anything, doesn't respect anyone. And now she's built her entire future around those assumptions. My job is not to crush her. It just lets gravity do what it does with people who build houses on sand. On Monday, I sat in a leather chair in the office of Attorney General Margaret Collins. We've known each other for 20 years. She helped set up the trust when David was still in high school. She scanned the documents, shuffled them neatly, and looked up at me. Tom, are you sure you want to do this? I'm sure, I said. Because once we start, you can't open this bell. I thought of Victoria calling me a burden, printing an eviction timeline, displaying brochures for senior citizen homes as party gifts. She thinks I'm helpless, I said. The bell started ringing as soon as she decided my dignity was optional. Margaret nodded slowly. We have covered everything. Deeds, tax records, trusts, insurance contracts. She does the math aloud. So Victoria thinks she inherited about $570,000 between the house and the insurance, she said. But in reality, she didn't inherit anything. The home is yours. The insurance belongs to the trust. And the faith belongs to you while you are alive. That's right, I said. What do you want, Tom? Be specific. First, I want life insurance money to be handled correctly. No more delays. Done. Secondly, I want to formally inform Victoria that she is my tenant, not the owner, and she has 30 days to move out. 30 days, she repeated. The same deadline she gave you. Exactly. Third, I want the conversation where she knows the truth to happen in front of witnesses, specifically the colleagues she impressed by calling me a burden. Margaret raised her eyebrows. Honestly, it's like a public humiliation. What she did to me was public humiliation. What I'm doing is making public repairs. There's a difference. She leaned back, watching me. You don't do this for revenge. No, I said. If she talks to me with a little respect, we'll have coffee at my kitchen table, draw up a plan. I'll help her land on her feet. Then why is that? Because she treats me like trash and teaches people that it's okay. Her neighbors, her friends, her co-workers. Such a person needs to know that action has consequences. Not because I hate her, but because if no one calls you out for that kind of behavior, you're never going to stop. Margaret smiled, just a little. I can get everything ready tomorrow at 10 a.m. at her office. Perfect, I said. Let the real estate professional learn something about real estate. Tuesday at 10 a.m., we walked into Premier Realty on Main Street. The place looks exactly like what you'd expect a suburban real estate office to look like: a white desk, motivational quotes in black frames, photos of families smiling at homes with sale signs. Victoria is sitting at her desk, dressed in a sleek blazer and high heels, showing a young couple photos on a tablet. She looked up, saw me, and her smile froze. "Tom? What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," I said calmly. "Private. I'm with a client," she replied through clenched teeth. "This is really not a good time." Margaret stepped forward. "I'm Margaret Collins, Mr. Mitchell's lawyer. We need to discuss urgent legal issues related to your late husband's estate." The word lawyer fell like a falling saucer. Every head in that office rotates a fraction of an inch. Victoria's customers exchanged glances. We can reschedule," the husband muttered. "No, wait." Victoria reached out, but they were halfway through the door. The blonde agent from Sunday, Jessica, appears from the street corner, curiosity written on her face. "Victoria, is everything okay?" "It's okay, Jessica," Victoria said, her voice crisp. "Tom is just having trouble accepting his new living arrangements." "Actually," Margaret said, cold and professional, "Tom is having a hard time accepting the lies about his old lies." The room became quiet. "This relates to the property at 447 Maple Street," Margaret continued. "And there are some misunderstandings about ownership that need to be clarified." Victoria crossed her arms. "There is no misunderstanding. I inherited my husband's house. End of story." Margaret opened the first folder. 447 Maple Street, she read. The deed was recorded on March 15, 1987. Owner, Thomas Mitchell. There are no co-signers, no transfers, no collateral. No change in ownership was recorded. Never. She placed the deed on Victoria's desk. Jessica leaned in, her eyes wide. Victoria snatched it, scanning it quickly. "This is definitely outdated," she said. "David inherited the house when his mother died." Margaret shook her head. Margaret Mitchell never owned a 447 Maple. It was purchased by Thomas Mitchell before they were married, and has always been his private property. "But David paid the mortgage," Victoria objected. "There has been no mortgage on that property since 1993, Margaret replied. "It's paid off for decades. Real estate tax, insurance, utilities." She opened the second folder. "All paid by Thomas Mitchell. We have records from 37 years ago. Would you like to meet them?" All around us, the keyboard was silent. Every agent listens. Victoria's voice trembled. That can't be true. David told me that he was supporting his father. He said, "David helps me work." "Victoria," I said quietly. "He brought groceries. He drives me to appointments. He fixes everything around the house." I kept her eyes. "I helped him with money, not the other way around." Her mouth opened, closed. Margaret opened the third folder. "Financially," she says, "Tom founded the Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust in 1985. Current balance, $853,412. If one number could suck all the air out of the room, it did." "David Mitchell," Margaret continued, "was the beneficiary of that trust all his life, but never a trustee, never an owner. It funds his studies, weddings, and other supports. But the property was still Tom's while he was alive." Victoria's face had gone from flushing to something almost shocked. That's impossible," she whispered. "David has his own money. His own narration." "I'm sure he did," Margaret said. "But the house on Maple and most of the money you think is his if he never leaves you. I could see the thought forming in Victoria's mind. Life insurance. Policy, she blurted out. David's life insurance. It's mine, he told me. Margaret sank into one last document. Beneficiary, Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust, she reads. Again, managed by Thomas Mitchell. You can hear the pin falling. Jessica's eyes shifted from the paper to Victoria's face and back. This woman appeared in court in my living room a few days ago, calling me a burden in front of them. Now looks like someone has pulled the floor out from underneath her. Tom, she said, her voice weak. Why didn't you tell me anything about this? You never asked, I said. I let that hang there. You call me a burden, I continued. In my house. You've printed an eviction timeline. You've been shopping nursing homes for me as if you're helping me. I nodded to Margaret. She pulled out one last envelope and gently placed it on the table. This is an official announcement, she said. Effective today, you are a monthly tenant in Mr. Mitchell's home at 447 Maple at his discretion. You have 30 days to move out. After that, the legal deportation proceedings will begin. Victoria's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. 30 days? She whispered. But where should I go? You're a licensed real estate agent, Margaret said steadily. You help people find homes to make a living. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Victoria looked at me not like I was a burden, not as if I was a problem, but as if I was the only adult in the room. Tom, I don't know. You didn't ask, I repeated. There's a difference. I turned around to go. Tom, she called. What's going on now? I looked back at her, her colleagues, into the office full of people who had heard her version of my life. Now, I said, now you learn the same lesson you tried to teach me. She frowned. And what lesson is that? That reality doesn't care what you think you're entitled to, I said. And I walked out. The fallout happened faster than I expected. My neighbor Helen showed up on my porch the next day, holding a cup of coffee and a guilty conscience. Tom, everyone is talking, she said, sitting down in the chair where Margaret used to sit. About what? I asked. About Victoria, about the house, about money. About how she spent 2 months acting like she was some kind of savior when you were the one who quietly funded everything. I didn't say anything. I let her go on. My granddaughter works as a receptionist at Premier Realty, Helen added. Say that 3 customers have requested to switch agents. They've seen what happened, or heard, and they don't trust her judgment anymore. In real estate, trust is monetary. Mess with that, you're broke. 2 days later, David's college friend Mike walked by. Tom, I owe you an apology, he said. For what? I asked. Because I trust Victoria. She told us that you can't manage your finances on your own, that David is sponsoring you, that he's drowning, trying to keep you afloat. He shook his head. But how does he really talk about you? It's quite the opposite. He told me how proud he is of you, the way you teach him everything he knows about money, about responsibility. Then why do you believe her? I asked. He stared at the floor. Because it fits the image in my head. The old man, the dead wife, the only son helped. Meaningful. We never thought of asking if that feeling was really true. Assume again. They are amazing until the reality comes with the paperwork. Margaret called me on the weekends. Her lawyer wants to negotiate, she said. Negotiate what? I asked. Victoria wants to stay in the house for 6 months instead of 30 days. She's willing to pay rent. How much? $2,000 a month. I almost laughed. The market rent for a house like this is nearly $3,000, Margaret continued. We can ask for $3,500, the first and last deposit. Do it, I said. She wants to stay. She can pay like anybody else. A day later, Margaret called back. She can't afford it. So she's leaving? I asked. She's leaving, Margaret confirmed. And she will also be leaving Premier Realty. Apparently, the client continues to ask other agents and her broker to gently suggest a fresh start elsewhere might be best. Not only did she lose the house she thought she owned, she has lost the reputation she thought she had built on it. I didn't celebrate. It doesn't feel like a victory. It's like a physics lesson. You treat people as if they're disposable. You build your life on arrogance and assumptions. In the end, gravity does what it always does. 3 weeks after she moved out, my doorbell rang. It was a Saturday. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in months. I opened the door, and there she was, Victoria. This time there was no armor, no high heels, no directory full of plans, just a cardboard box in my hand and dark circles under my eyes. "Hello, Tom," she said softly. "I found some things that belonged to you." She walked in as I stepped aside and placed the box on the coffee table. Inside were photo albums of David as a child, Margaret's recipe cards in her repetitive handwriting, old birthday cards that I had forgotten existed. She sat on the edge of the couch and looked around. "It looks the same," she said quietly. "The house." "Why not?" I asked. "I don't know. I guess I think you're going to tear everything up. Redo the kitchen. Start again." "Some things don't need to be restarted," I said. "They just need to be respected." She swallowed. "Tom, I owe you more than one apology." "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You owe yourself some honest thoughts. It's between you and the mirror." "Maybe," she said, "but I'll say this anyway." She took a breath. "I treated you terribly. I talk about you as if you are trash. I see the house as an award that I have won instead of a house that you have built. I made fun of your car, your clothes, your way of life. I call you a burden when you're the one who quietly holds things together." She blinked vigorously. "And I did it all while spending money that wasn't mine and planning for a future that never existed." I let her speak. Sometimes the best thing you can give someone is the space to hear their own voice. "I used to think loud means strong," she admits. "That the person who talks the most is the one in control." She shook her head. "Look at you. Just quietly walk into my office and put the truth on my desk in front of everyone. That has hurt my ego more than any screaming match could have been." "The goal isn't to hurt you," I said. "The goal is to put the truth where people can see it. What you build on that truth is up to you." She nodded. "I had a job in Columbus," she said. "Another company. Cities are different. I'm starting over. I actually read the deed now. Double-check who owns what. Ask questions instead of assumptions." "It's a good start," I said. She stood up, stroking her coat. "Can I ask you something? One last thing?" she said. "Go ahead," I replied. "If I had been different from the beginning—" She hesitated. "If I treat you with respect, asking you about finances instead of declaring everything, will any of these things turn out differently?" I thought about the question, about the early days with her. "Yes," I said honestly. "If you come up to me and say, 'Tom, I'm scared. I don't know how to handle all this. Can we figure it out together?' I'm going to have you sit down at this table, pour you a cup of coffee, and show you all the documents. We'll find out how to use the trust fund to help you move out of your home in a way that honors David. She closed her eyes for a second. So it's not like you want to kick me out, she said quietly. No, I said. I want to get rid of disrespect. You just tied yourself to it and refused to let go. She exhaled a breath, half laughing, half sobbing. I guess I've learned the hard way that respect is non-negotiable, she said. Never, I replied. At the door, she turned. For what it's worth, she said. David always says he's the strongest man he knows. I think he means physically. Now I understand. After she left, I opened the box. There's a photo at the top. 16-year-old David smiling on the porch, arm around my shoulder, sawdust in his hair from some project we're working on. In the background, you can see the entire front of the house, the same crown mold that Victoria called obsolete, the same partition she wanted to paint, the same porch she thought she had inherited. I sat back in my chair and realized something. I didn't win. This is not about winning. It's about refusing to let others rewrite the truth of my life because they speak louder than I do. If you're still here, listening to an old man talk about actions and disrespect, let me leave you with this. Just because you're silent doesn't mean you're weak. Just because you drive an old car, or live simply, or don't flaunt what you have doesn't mean you don't have anything. People will completely confuse humility with helplessness. They will confuse your silence with surrender. They'll assume that because they're saying the loudest, they're right. They are not. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one with the papers, and wait for the right time to put it on the table. If this story hits something in you, if you've ever been undervalued for your age, your salary, or how quiet your life is, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to remind someone that respect is earned, not an inheritance? And if you want more realistic stories like this, about boundaries, betrayal, karma, and silent people finally standing their feet, like this video to let the algorithm know it's important. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that they're not as helpless as people make them feel. I'm Thomas Mitchell. Thank you for listening. Please leave one like and subscribe to the channel if you find the story, or leave a comment, and please spread it to other people to listen. And remember, silence doesn't mean you don't have a voice. It just means that eventually, when you decide to speak, people will have no choice but to listen.